Shabbat Shalom, Mishpachah. This is Maury Kanan coming at you with another Shabbat lesson. We are going to continue our series on Guard Your Gates, and today we're going to talk about the mouth. All right, so this is part 2A. All right, let's get started. All right, so Guard Your Gates, part 2A. Everything that we will talk about today has to deal with our mouths. For some of us, it can be hard to keep a tight lid on our mouths. It manipulates all aspects of our lives, whether good or bad. We will concentrate on the contrast between good and evil words. We will look at what makes foolish speech so dangerous to those who are walking in this truth. As we will see today, there is always a time and a place to speak, and likewise there is always a time and a place to be silent. Wisdom doesn't come to the person who speaks the most. The person who uses his or her words wisely simply prolongs their days and gains favor among the righteous. I think that we are in a time where the Father is going to start forcing people's hand. What do I mean? We talk about the inner man a lot. I don't think people realize how important are the things that we speak. When you say whatever the Father has for me, let it happen, you don't think the Father didn't hear that? We aren't just tested by our actions, but our words as well. If what you're saying isn't rooted in righteousness and in truth, you can find yourself in a world of hurt. Those words can come back on you 10 on you times 10. When it comes to dealing with us as a people of the Most High, it's extremely hard. We are our own worst enemy. Even on a personal note, when it comes to ourselves, we talk ourselves into destruction like nobody's business. The division and hatred can be over the littlest of things, and honestly, most important within this walk is over doctrine. No one wants to sit down at the table and talk in order to get an understanding. It comes down to what I know versus what you know or what you think you know. Now, sit back and ask yourself this question. Will self-hatred among my brothers and sisters and myself make it into the kingdom? And if not, why do we do it? During times like these, one of the worst things you can do is turn on your fellow neighbor. That can come back to bite you very hard. Also, during these times, who will be able to trust you to help them? Where will your mindset be if someone asks you for help? Putting someone down can have dangerous consequences as well. We will find that out later today. Your mouth can get you in all sorts of trouble, not just with each other, but the Father as well. All right, so let's get started. Going to talk about evil speaking or speaking evil. Start off an example of 1 Peter 2 and 1. So put away all malice and all deceit and hypocrisy and envy and all slander. So this represents the Greek translation of katalalia, a speaking against. And it is also rendered as backbiting, as we will see in 2 Corinthians 12 and 20, and katalalos and backbiter in Romans 1:30. Now, let's first read it in 2 Corinthians 12 and 20. For I fear that perhaps when I come, I may find you not as I wish, and that you may find me not as you wish, that perhaps there may be quarreling, jealousy, anger, hostility, slander, or backbiting, gossip, conceit, and disorder. Such vices are sins against the community and create division among believers. You can't operate in such a spirit of ruach and think that the Father is going to accept you. Now, how do we know this? Now, the works of the flesh are manifest. They are these: adultery, fornication, uncleanness, lasciviousness, idolatry, fascinations, enmities, strife, emulations, animosities, contentions, factions, or sects, or Um, for factions and sex, it could be divisions, envyings, murderers, drunkenness, revilings, and the like, of which I forewarn you, as I have indeed before declared that they who practice such things shall not inherit the kingdom of Elohim. This is in Galatians 5:19 to 21. Now, these works of the flesh listed here denote forms of possible conflict among people. While this list is not exhaustive, it adequately represents life apart from the spirit of Ruach, or simply put, doing the direct opposite of what's needed to get into the kingdom. We see another example of that in Romans 1:30. Slanderers or backbiting, haters of Elohim, insolent, haughty, boastful, inventors of evil, disobedient to parents. 1 Corinthians 6:9 and 10. Do you not know that the unjust shall not inherit the kingdom of Elohim? Be not deceived, neither fornicators, nor idolaters, nor adulterers, nor the voluptuous, nor sodomites, nor thieves, nor such as indulge inordinate desires, nor drunkards, nor railers, nor extortioners shall inherit the kingdom of Elohim. Now, Paul uses these lists to describe those who aren't set apart. You run out of excuses at some point during your walk. Ignorance can't be your go-to excuse. There are some things, granted that you probably won't know or yet understand. I'll give you that, but for the most part, getting a basic grip on the law, statutes, and commandments is a must. You will have to build up your foundation. And that starts with fearing the word. Right? So katalalia, to speak against, often involving speaking evil of. To speak evil of, to slander or slander. Right? Now the verb katalalio is rendered to speak against as well. We see examples of this in 1 Peter 2 and 12, James 4:11, 1 Peter 3 and 16. 1 Peter 2 and 12. Keep your conduct among the Gentiles honorable, so that when they speak against you as evildoers, they may see your good deeds and esteem Elohim on the day of visitation. Stop letting people get to you. Your humbleness will speak volumes for you. Keep in mind, I'm not saying to let people walk all over you. You know, you can have some self-respect about yourself and not let people just run amok over you. But we'll talk more about being humble, hopefully in our next lesson. This also goes back to an earlier statement I made about staying on your square. You know, not letting anybody knock you off your square. Basically, this is just saying stay focused, not letting the little things remove you from the task at hand. The enemy knows your weakness. Some of us have a mouth that will not stop. The enemy can and will use that to his advantage. Now, I want y'all to think about that the next time someone cuts you off in traffic, okay? Don't be so quick to slander somebody. 1 Peter 3 and 16, having a good conscience so that when you are slandered, those who revile your good behavior in Mashiach may be put to shame, right? So there is a reward in being humble. Stepping down to someone's level of evilness won't solve the issue. It can actually make you look bad. Okay, and again, we will talk more about this in a little bit, but humility goes a long way. The only question is, are you going to willingly display your humbleness before the Father, or is he going to force you to do it? The Father most definitely has his way of getting his point across, and humbling you is one of them. All right, so more on that later. James 4:11 to 12. Do not speak evil against one another, brothers. The one who speaks against a brother or judges his brother speaks evil against the law and judges the law. But if you judge the law, you are not a doer of the law, but a judge. There is only one lawgiver and one judge, he who is able to save and to destroy. But who are you to judge your neighbor? What about you makes you more righteous than anyone else? Who are you to speak on matters of someone else instead of yourself? Accountability starts at home. Now, you can start to see the direction I'm going in when it comes to our mouths, right? You have to be careful about what you say. So now let's talk about the evil spirit or evil ruach. Okay? The concept of evil generally describes behavior or attitudes categorized by extreme wickedness and intent to cause social, physical, psychological, emotional, or spiritual harm. The concept encompasses moral, ethical, behavioral, or spiritual dimensions. An evil thing, okay? An evil thing or evil things may be the thoughts of evil men, their plans or their deeds, or the things men suffer for their own wrongs, or the evils consequent upon the errors of others. So let's take a look at some examples. We're going to start with Matthew 12:35 to 37. This is the Mashiach talking. A good man out of good treasures bringeth forth good things. A bad man out of bad treasures bringeth forth bad things. For I say to you that for every idle word that men shall speak, they shall give an account of it in the day of judgment. For by thy words thou shalt be justified, and by thy words thou shalt be condemned. Since words express the heart, good words demonstrate a good heart, and bad words a bad heart. On judgment day, words will provide evidence for vindication or condemnation. Simple as that. It still has a lot to do with the inner man. Now, again, you can't fool everybody you think you can fool except the Father. All because that's where the Father starts. He looks directly on the inside, and you can't hide from that. Okay? You can't hide that from him. This brings us to the Greek term poneros. It's an adjective. It's describing bad, wicked, or evil. Refers primarily to moral badness, but also can refer to an undesirable condition. Occasionally, poneros may describe something as physical, harmful, or painful. We see an example of this in Revelation 16:2. So the first angel went and poured out his bowl on the earth, and harmful and painful sores came upon the people who bore the mark of the beast and worshiped its image. Now, usually poneros is used to describe a person. We'll see an example of that in Matthew 12:34. Offspring of vipers, how can ye who are evil speak good things? For out of the fullness of the heart the mouth speaketh. Now, it also describes inaction as morally evil. We see an example of that in James 4:15 to 16. Instead of your saying, if it be Yahuwah's will and we shall live, we will do this or that. You now boast of your arrogant projects. All such boasting is evil. Therefore, to know what is good and not do it is a sin. So this goes back to what we were talking about earlier, okay? The excuses at some point will run out. Then the question asks, are you either going to be obedient or not? Okay? You have to sit down and ask yourself that question. You're just going to can't keep straddling the fence. Either you're going to be on one side or you're going to be on the other. People who lack spiritual insight are called an evil generation. We see an example of that in Matthew 16:1 to 4. And the Pharisees and the Sadducees came near tempting him and asking him to show them a sign from heaven of Shamayim. But he answered and said to them, when it is evening, ye say, it will be fair weather, for the heavens are red. And in the morning ye say, there will be a storm today, for the heavens are sadly red. Ye hypocrites, ye are intelligent to discover the aspect of the heavens, but the signs of this time ye have no skill to discern. A wicked and adulterous generation asketh for a sign, but no sign shall be given it, but the sign of the prophet Jonah. And he left them and departed. So this just sums up who were often opposed to each other, but united in order to test Yahuwah. And doesn't that work today? People don't know other people from the time they were born. Couldn't care less about each other or let alone agree on something. But when it has something to do with you, or as all of a sudden everybody's buddy buddy. All right? That happens a lot. They demand a sign to authenticate his credentials as Mashiach. Having already performed many signs, he refuses their request, instead choosing to comment on their spiritual blindness. So basically, you know, if what you're saying doesn't line up with people, then they're gonna come against you. Now, people who tend to deal with things emotionally seem to miss the big picture sometimes, right? This is also where words can cause the most damage. Now, Satan or Hashatan is called the evil one. And we'll see an example of that in Matthew 13:38, John 17:15. And he answered and said to them, He that soweth the good seed is the son of Elohim, and the field is the world. And the good seed are the children of the kingdom, but the tares are the children of the wicked one. The enemy that showed them is Satan or Hashatan. And I'm sorry, not showed, but sold them. The harvest is the end of the world, and the reapers are the angels of Malachus. And therefore the tares are gathered and burned in the fire, so will it be in the end of the world. The Son of the Man will send forth his angels, and they will gather out of his kingdom all the stumbling blocks and all the doers of evil, and will cast them into a furnace of fire. There will be a wailing and gnashing of teeth. Then will the righteous shine as the sun in the kingdom of their Father. He that hath ears to hear, let him hear. Matthew 12:35. The good person out of his good treasure brings forth good, and the evil or the pernicious person out of his evil treasure brings forth evil. Now, this is just saying there has to be a mindset change. The warning signs are there. I'm not saying that it's easy, because we all know it is not, but just look at where we are. Our ancestors couldn't get it right. The difference is that today we have a guide that lets us know the do's and the don'ts. Now, brings us to our next word, which is kakos. Now, this is a primary word which denotes worthless. Interesting, such a whereas it refers to the effects, i.e., depraved or injurious, bad, evil, harm, ill, noisome, or wicked. Now, as an adjective, is morally reprehensible, evil, and primarily describes things as morally evil, sometimes describe things as harmful or painful. Now, since kakos is a general term for evil, as with Greek adjectives in general, it can also be used as a noun. In this particular example, we'll see it talks about thoughts. And we'll see this in Colossians 3, 5 to 6. Mortify therefore your members that are on the earth, whoredom, impurity, and passions and evil competence, and avarice, which is idolatry. For on an account of these things the wrath of Elohim cometh on the children of disobedience. Now we need to put to death what is earthly. The ways of the world should at some point come to an end. The way we think, the way we act, what we say, all these things at some point in this walk need to change. It can be of certain deeds that are characterized as kakos. We'll see that in Philippians 3 and 2. Now, these things are characterized as kakos, okay? Philippians 3, 2 and 3. Beware of dogs, beware of evildoers, beware of the clipped in flesh, for we are the real circumcision, who worship Elohim in spirit of Ruach and esteem in Yahushua HaMashiach and place no reliance on the flesh. So this is just saying do away with the flesh, right? It's one of the biggest stumbling blocks. Coming from whatever mindset you had before you came into this walk could have taken decades to develop. I understand. The thing is we have the good news now. Right? Just like I say in my prayers, the scales have been lifted. You can't help but rejoice at knowing what you know now. No matter how long you've been in this truth, the Father has already brought you a mighty long way. Okay? Men should not lust after evil things. We see an example of that in 1 Corinthians 10 and 6. Now, these things took place as examples for us, that we might not desire evil as they did. Now, the fixing the mind upon with desire leads to increased wrong. The mouth of the wicked poureth out evil or raw things. See an example of that in Proverbs 15 and 28. The heart of the righteous ponders how to answer, but the mouth of the wicked pours out evil things. Now, again, this is just a clear example. You have to be careful with your speech in all aspects of life. Because, like I said before, these things can come back to bite you. Now, we just read something that has to deal with raw or evil. Okay? And raw is the H7451. It comes from the 7489, which means just bad, or as a noun, evil. It's adversity, affliction, bad, calamity, displeasure, distress. Okay? Not pleasing, is sadly, is sore, is trouble, is vex, or wickedly. That will lead us into the next term, which would be rasha. All right, it's a verb, be wicked or unrighteous, be wrong. Refers to being wicked or guilty or to acting wickedly. Some forms can mean to pronounce guilty, to condemn. Now, after ra'ah and related terms, the rasha word group is the most common for describing evil and wickedness in the OT or the Torah or the Old Testament. Okay. Now, rasha has a fairly narrow range of meaning, almost always referring to morally bad actions, guilt, and intent to harm. It appears frequently in wisdom literature in contrast between the righteous and the wicked. We'll see examples in Proverbs 10 and 3, and Proverbs 12 and 26. Yahuwah will not kill with hunger a righteous soul, but he will overthrow the life of the wicked. Now, Yahuwah pushes away the things desired by the wicked. We all should know that no, he doesn't reward disobedience, right? Proverbs 12 and 26. One who is righteous is a guide to his neighbor, but the way of the wicked leads them astray. Now, the ways of both the righteous and the wicked influence those whom they associate with. Now, this is the opposite of keeping your friends close and your enemies closer. You don't want your enemies near you. Why? Because those could actually be your so-called friends. Being unequally yoked, whether a friendship or otherwise, but can be put in the stumbling block category. If you've been immersed, a lot of the stuff that the Father tells us not to do is in the water, right? It's supposed to be dead and gone. Well, guess what? Hanging around certain people that you hung around with from your former life still carry around those same things. Now, those things can pull your focus away. That's why there has to be a mindset change. Okay, so again, Rasha. It means wicked, guilty, describes one who is guilty of crimes or sins or whose behavior is categorized by wickedness. The use of rasha to describe a person or activity indicates that the person's guilt is certain or that the behavior in question has unquestionably been established as wrong. The term appears in ethical teaching about people who resist obeying the laws, civil or religious, or who oppose Elohim's standard for righteous or good behavior. And we see an example of that in Deuteronomy 25 and 2, Ezekiel 3:18, Proverbs 17 and 23, Malachi 3:16 to 18. Then if the guilty man deserves to be beaten, the judge shall cause him to lie down and be beaten in his presence with a number of stripes in proportion to his offense. Ezekiel 3 and 18. If I say to the wicked, you shall surely die, and you give him no warning, nor speak to warn the wicked from his wicked way, in order to save his life, That wicked person shall die for his iniquity, but his blood I will require at your hand. Responsibility ends with providing the warning. If you love your brother in righteousness and in truth, the same obligation to warn the wicked to repent and the righteous not to stray into wickedness shouldn't be a problem for you to say. You should have no problem with pulling your brother or your sister away from the darkness. All right? Proverbs 17:23. The wicked accepts a bribe in secret to pervert the ways of justice. Malachi 3:16 and 18. Then those who feared Yahuwah spoke with one another. Yahuwah paid attention and heard them. And a book of remembrance was written before him of those who feared Yahuwah and esteemed his name. They shall be mine, says Yahuwah of hosts. In the day when I make up my treasured possession, and I will spare them as a man spares his son who serves him. Then once more you shall see the distinction between the righteous and the wicked, between one who serves Elohim and one who does not serve him. Okay, so now we have Risha. Okay, this means wickedness, refers to evil and wicked behavior, often in contrast with righteousness. Now, the book of Ecclesiastes laments the prevalence of wickedness in the world instead of justice and righteousness. See an example of that in Ecclesiastes 3 and 16. Moreover, I saw under the sun that in the place of justice even there was a wickedness, and in the place of righteousness even there was a wickedness. Now, wickedness is associated with violence and sin. We see an example of that in Proverbs 4:17, Deuteronomy 9:27, and Jeremiah 14 and 20. For they eat the bread of wickedness, and drink plentiful of the wine of violence. But the paths of the just shine like light, shining more and more until it is perfect day. Deuteronomy 9:27. Remember Abraham and Isaac and Jacob, thy servants, to whom thou didst swear by thyself. Look not upon the stubbornness of this people, nor upon their wickedness and their sins. Jeremiah 14 and 20. We acknowledge our wickedness, O Yahuwah, and the iniquity of our fathers, for we have sinned against you. Now, David indicates that one quality of a good king is that he loves righteousness and hates wickedness. We see an example of that in Psalms 45 and 7. You have loved righteousness and hated wickedness. Therefore, Elohim, your Elohim, has anointed you with the oil of gladness beyond your companions. Now, guess what? This doesn't just go for kings. This is for all people who are called by his name. We all have to have a mindset that we all must flee from wickedness and clothe ourselves in righteousness. Okay? So now we have Risha. And this is describing wickedness or guilt. It refers to evil and wicked behavior, often in contrast with righteousness. This form of the word is used less frequently, but in much the same way as Resha or Russia, to indicate wicked behavior or guilt that has already been demonstrated. And we see an example of this in Proverbs 13:6, which uses the word for the same contrast between wickedness and righteousness. Okay. So starting with Proverbs 13 and 6, righteousness guards him whose way is blameless, but sin overthrows the wicked. The integrity of the upright guides them, but the crookedness of the treacherous destroys them. That was Proverbs 11 and 3. Proverbs 11 and 5, the righteousness of the blameless keeps his way straight, but the wicked falls by his own wickedness. And Proverbs 11 and 6, the righteousness of the upright delivers them, but the treacherous are taken captive by their lust. Now, these proverbs contrast the security enjoyed by the righteous with the inevitable destruction of the wicked. The righteous enjoy deliverance from trouble and have security because of their integrity, righteousness, and wisdom. And this is all in contrast to the wicked's action, which ultimately led to the destruction because of their perversionness and overall wickedness and lust. Now, instead of avoiding the trouble, the wicked walked right into it. how did they walk right into it? Most doubtably, it probably was from their mouth. So this leads us to speech, which is the human capacity to express oneself and communicate with others through the spoken word. Now, Elohim addresses humans through the spoken word, and supremely in and through Yahushua HaMashiach, which we all know is the Word. All right? Speech, power, and significance of. A person's speech has an enormous influence for good or ill, and is a sure guide to character. Okay? So we're going to look at the impact of speech. It has the power of life and death. We all know this one right here, Proverbs 18 and 21. We're also going to look at Proverbs 15, 2 and 4. Now, starting with Proverbs 18 and 21. Death and life are in the power of the tongue, and they who have the command of it shall eat the fruits thereof. Proverbs 15 and 2. The tongue of the wise commends knowledge, but the mouths of fools pour out folly. In Proverbs 15 and 4, a gentle tongue is a tree of life, but the perverseness in it breaks the spirit or the ruach. So again, you have to simply be cautious of everything you are saying. And remember that your words, whether good or bad, will be revisited in the end. So speech, it can bring ruin or joy to the speaker. We see examples of this in Proverbs 12, 13 to 14, Psalms 140 and 9, Proverbs 10 to 14, and Proverbs 13 to 3, Proverbs 14 to 3, Proverbs 18, 6 and 7, and 18 to 20, and Proverbs 21 and 23, and Ecclesiastes 10, 12 to 14. So we are going to start in Proverbs 12, 13 to 14. By the transgression of his lips a sinner falleth into snares, but out of them a righteous man maketh his escape. He whose looks are mild will gain compassion, but he who contendeth in the gates will afflict souls. From the fruits of his mouth the soul of a man shall be satisfied with good things, and the recompense of his lips shall be given him. Psalm 140 and 9. As for the head of those who surround me, let the mischief of their lips overwhelm them. Proverbs 10 and 14. The wise lay up knowledge, but the mouth of a fool brings ruin near. Proverbs 11 and 11. By the blessing of the upright a city is exalted, but the mouth of the wicked it is overthrown. Proverbs 13 and 3. Whoever guards his mouth preserves his life. He who opens wide his lips comes to ruin. Proverbs 14 and 3. By the mouth of a fool comes a rod for his back, but the lips of the wise will preserve them. And Proverbs 18, 6 and 7. A fool's lips walk into a fight, and his mouth invites a beating. A fool's mouth is his ruin, and his lips are a snare to his soul. Let's keep going. Proverbs 18 and 20. From the fruit of a man's mouth his stomach is satisfied. He is satisfied by the yield of his lips. And we look at Ecclesiastes 10, 12 to 14. The words of a wise man's mouth win him favor, but the lips of a fool consume him. The beginning of the words of his mouth is foolishness, and the end of his talk is evil madness. A fool multiplies words, though no man knows what is to be, and who can tell him what will be after him? Now, the wicked are caught by their own speech. This is someone being caught in a lie or falling victim to their own rash or foolish words. Let's remember what happened to Nabal when he spoke against King Daud. His words and his actions came back to haunt him, which led to his untimely death. Now you can read this in 1 Samuel 25, 10 to 13, and did a whole lesson on it. You have to be careful of what you say. If you want righteousness to come back on you, then you have to be righteous yourself. This is point blank. Now, this is going to bring us to blasphemy. Okay? Now, blasphemy is slander or disrespect expressed against Elohim or the sacred, characterized by ir- ir- um, irrele- irrelevant or disrespectful speech. It involves cursing or insulting Elohim, persons, places, or objects considered sacred. Defiant or impious acts, such as showing contempt for Elohim and sacred things. And this can also be considered blasphemous. Okay, the Bible consistently witnesses to the gravity of this offense and to the danger facing the unrepentant offender. Blasphemy in the form of slander and verbal abuse can also be directed against Elohim's people. An attitude of flagrant irreverence or disrespect toward Elohim is the root of blasphemy. And the biblical terms used to describe blasphemy emphasize the element of verbal expressions of contempt or cursing directed at Elohim and the sacred. Now, in the Torah, commonly called the Old Testament, a number of terms and their derived forms carry the connotation of blasphemy. All the words reflect the common theme that Elohim is inferior and unworthy of respect or reverence. Now, what I want to focus on are some specific terms. All right, and we will start with Gadaf, which means to revile, insult, as in 2 Kings 19 and 6 and Isaiah 37 and 23, where the servants of the Assyrian king spoke abusively against Yahuwah, claiming that he is weak and unable to protect his people. So let's start in 2 Kings 19 and 6. Isaiah said to them, say to your master, thus says Yahuwah, do not be afraid because of the words that you have heard, with which the servants of the king of Assyria have reviled me. And we see this in Isaiah 37 and 23. Whom have you mocked and reviled? Against whom have you raised your voice? Now, the term na'as, often translated to despise, frequently occurs in the context where Yahuwah's own people call into question his trustworthiness or faithfulness, and so despise him by their unbelief and rebellion. And we all know this one here in Numbers 14 and 11. And Yahuwah said to Moses, how long will this people despise me? And how long will they not believe in me, in spite of all the signs that I have done among them? The terms ka'al, to curse, and nakab, to blaspheme, frequently appear together. In one notable episode in Leviticus 24:10 to 23, an half Israelite, or someone who is half Egyptian, half Israelite, blasphemed the name and cursed. Okay, and we'll see this in Leviticus 24:10 to 23. All right, punishment for blasphemy. Now, an Israelite woman's son, whose father was an Egyptian from Mizraim, basically, went out among the people of Israel, and the Israelite woman's son and a man of Israel fought in the camp, and the Israelite woman's son blasphemed the name and cursed. Then they brought him to Moses. His mother's name was Shalamoth, the daughter of Debri of the tribe of Dan. And they put him in custody till the will of Yahuwah should be clear to them. Then Yahuwah spoke to Moses, saying, bring out of the camp the one who cursed, and let all who heard him lay their hands on his head, and let all the congregation stone him. And speak to the people of Israel, saying, whoever curses his Elohim shall bear his sin. Whoever blasphemes the name of Yahuwah shall surely be put to death. And all the congregation shall stone him. The sojourner as well as the native, when he blasphemes the name, shall be put to death. Whoever takes a human life shall surely be put to death. Whoever takes an animal's life shall make it good, life for life. If anyone injures his neighbor as he has done, it shall be done to him. Fracture for fracture, eye for eye, tooth for tooth. Whatever injury he has given a person shall be given to him. Whoever kills an animal shall make it good, and whoever kills a person shall be put to death. You shall have the same rule for the sojourner and for the native. For I am Yahuwah your Elohim. So Moses spoke to the people of Israel, and they brought out of the camp the one who had cursed and stoned him with stones. Thus the people of Israel did as Yahuwah commanded Moses. As a consequence of treating Elohim's name contemptuously, or ka'al, and dragging it down to a vulgar level, nakav, he was put to death. The word haraf, to taunt, describes the actions of pagans such as Goliath, who in 1 Samuel 17, 1 to 58, repeatedly taunts Yahuwah and the Israelites, denying Elohim's greatness and power while exalting his own. Now you can read that on your own, okay? 1 Samuel 17, 1 to 58. Blasphemia, what is hurtful to the good name of anyone. Okay, it denotes detraction or slander. We see an example of this in Ephesians 4:31. Let all bitterness and wrath and anger and clamor and slander be put away from you, along with all malice. Colossians 3:8. But now you must put them all away anger, wrath, malice, slander, and obscene talk from your mouth. In the Brit Hadashah, commonly called the New Testament, the predominant group of terms centers on blasphemo, which is translated variously as blaspheme, or revile, slander, or malign. The verb blasphemio is rendered to speak evil of, and we see an example of that in Romans 14:16 and Titus 3:2. But before we go to the scripture examples, I want to go over some other examples, all right, some other definitions. And we're going to start with malign, okay? Now, malign is an adjective, which means evil in nature or effect, or malevolent, okay? She had a strong and malign influence. Now, similar is harmful, evil, bad, hostile, or destructive. Now, the verb means to speak about someone in a spitefully critical manner. Don't you dare malign her in my presence. Now, similarly, it means to defame, slander, or smear, i.e., run a smear campaign against. So now let's read Romans 14 and 16. So do not let what you regard as good be spoken of as evil. And Titus 3 and 2, to speak evil of no one, to avoid quarreling, to be gentle, and to show perfect courtesy toward all people. Now, another definition is malignant, okay, which means malevolent, having or showing a wish to do evil to others. In the hands of the malignant fate, okay, so similarly is spiteful, hostile, malevolent, malicious, or malign. Could also mean evil intention, vicious, poisonous, or venomous. Now, keep in mind with all these, okay? These are the direct opposite of being benevolent, which means well-meaning and kindly. Now, the second definition means of a disease, very virulent or infectious. So similarly, we have virulent, infectious, invasive, uncontrollable, dangerous, harmful, deadly, fatal, life-threatening, lethal, terminal, incurable. Okay. Remember when I was talking about how your words can come back to bite you. Okay. Now, with that, we have the infection itself. We have the virulent. Okay. It's an adjective of a disease or poison, extremely severe or harmful in its effects. And similarly, remember these terms here? It's poisonous, venomous, deadly, lethal, terminal, or life-threatening. Now, more importantly, let's look at the second definition, which is bitterly hostile. A virulent attack on liberalism, which results in being, and here it is, similarly, malicious, malevolent, malignant, or malign. All of that comes full circle. Okay? Your mouth can be a very dangerous instrument. This instrument or tool can be used to cause destruction and can spread just like a virus can. Now, I'm saying this in regards to being within this covenant. Okay? Now, the definition of a virulent is something very dangerous or harmful. It is also being especially bitter, ardent, and hostile. An example of a virulent is an aggressive and deadly disease. Now, in today's society, what would be an example of the virulent when it comes to this walk? And you leave me a comment below. Let me know what you have on that. Okay? But here's my answer. How about how you treat people? How you view them? Remember that the definition of malign is evil in nature or effect, right? So now that we've identified the virus, how would that virus be administered? Can someone give me an example, please? Won't you leave that down in the comments below as well? Okay. But here's my answer. How about when you rage a bitter and angry speech against your brother or sister that for whatever reason you don't like? This is where some of us are as we speak. There's a bitterness and rage in some of us that just can't be explained. Yet on the outside, everything is fine, right? We must remember that we can fool anyone with the outer man. It's that inner man that will get you in trouble every time. Not with man, but with the Father. Now, in these three lessons we've had so far, okay, we have identified not only how some of your gates operate, but what we need to do in order to keep them in righteous standing with the Father. The Father wanted me to point this out. Remember all the times you prayed, you were asking for this and praying for that, and nothing seemed to happen, right? Yes, the Father does test us, but the point of the test is to see where you are in a particular area. When you pray on a certain issue and that same issue won't seem to go away or doesn't change, this is a time to take a look at yourself and ask, what am I still doing that can be stopping me from progressing? I'm going to leave you with this note. Believers need to lead morally upright lives so as not to provide an occasion for slander on the part of unbelievers, all right, which will bring a poor reflection upon the Messiah. They will know you by your fruits. Okay, Mr. Pecan, this something a little quick and easy for you. Just wanted to give you the word of the Father. Have any questions or comments, you can leave them below, or you can send it to the email at pastoryahuwah@gmail.com. And if you really want to, you can visit our website at pastoryahuwah.com. Okay. Signing off right now. This is Morey Kanan saying Shabbat Shalom.